When the road ahead is a sheet of ice, rock salt can make the problem melt away. Salt lowers the melting point of water to thaw ice and also prevents its formation. Salt was first used to de-ice highways and walkways in the 1930s, but it was only in the 1960s that its use spread. Unprocessed rock salt actually looks like the ice it will eventually be used to melt. This salt comes from huge crystalline caverns 300 meters below the Earth's surface along the Canada-US border. That's a third of a kilometer underground. These massive deposits were formed hundreds of millions of years ago when saltwater lakes dried up. The clarity of this rock salt is a sign of its purity. This mineral is 98% sodium chloride, or salt. They extract it in chunks from the rock face by using explosives and drilling. Then a loader scoops up the broken pieces of salt. This is called a low-profile loader. It has a shorter height to fit into tight spaces underground. It transfers the salt to the primary crusher. This crusher is a spiked cylinder that spins to break the salt into pieces small enough to be moved on a conveyor. The conveyor takes the salt to a production elevator known as a skip. It takes just a minute and a half for the skip to lift its heavy load above ground and up a tower. When it stops, the bottom opens to empty the salty cargo. The salt funnels into two chutes and lands on vibrating screens. These screens are essentially big automated salt shakers. As they pulsate, they shake out the smaller bits, while larger chunks move on to be crushed again. Then it's on to more shaking sifters. These screen out the very fine particles, and what's left will be used as de-icing salt. There are several sifters in this room. They also sift out particles that are about 10 millimeters in size to be used as water softening product. And for this purpose, the darker bits are seen as undesirable. So they remove those with something called an optical sorter. The optical sorter bounces light off the salt particles, and a computer reads the reflection to determine if they're light or dark. Jets of compressed air then target the dark bits and blast them downward while the white particles continue forward. A closer look confirms that the optical sorter has done its job effectively. The salt meant for water softening is pure white, while a few darker speckles is acceptable for road salt. Outside in the holding area, the salt accumulates in piles that look like huge snowdrifts. If the winter is harsh, road crews will use it as fast as it piles up. When it comes to bulk purchasing, orders don't come much bigger than this. Highway maintenance departments buy de-icing salt by the truckload and create their own stockpiles to be prepared for stormy weather. But individual consumers, of course, buy de-icing salt by the bag. In the packaging department, automated trays relay plastic bags to grippers overhead, and the system moves them forward. Suctioning robot arms pry each bag open. A puff of air further inflates the bag, while a nozzle pipes measured amounts of the de-icing salt into the bag. Once the bag is full, the system moves it forward again, and not a grain of salt is spilled. Finally, a heat sealer melts the plastic to close the package. It's taken about an hour for this rock salt to be mined, crushed, sifted, and packaged. And now they're ready to take it to the street. salt comes from three sources: salt mines, land that was once a seabed, and from oceans and saltwater lakes. Factories extract salt from water by evaporation, either mechanically or naturally, by letting the sun work its magic and produce what's called solar salt. This large hunk of salt crystals comes from Great Salt Lake in the U.S. state of Utah. At full water level, the lake is 7 times saltier than the ocean. Harvesters scoop up salt from shallow crystallization ponds and load it into trucks. It's the end result of a 2-year evaporation cycle, which has seen the lake water, called brine, slowly give off its moisture in a series of concentrating ponds. What remains is a bed of salt crystals about 30 centimeters deep. The truck dumps its cargo onto the factory's conveyor system. First stop is a rinsing station to remove contaminants such as algae and dust. Using fresh water would dissolve the salt, so they flush the crystals with lake brine. Next, hot air dryers remove the moisture and salt dust within about 3.5 minutes. The salt crystals then roll across a series of sorting screens with progressively smaller openings. This classifies the salt crystals into 3 grades: coarse, medium, and fine. Each grade goes onto a separate conveyor that transports it to a designated storage bin. The factory uses medium-grade salt to make pellets for water softening equipment. This press compresses the crystals into pellet shapes, along with certain additives to help the water softening equipment perform better. Some municipal water supplies have a high mineral content. This hard water makes soap difficult to lather and leaves stains on sinks, bathtubs, and toilets. Salt triggers a chemical reaction that dissolves the problem minerals. The factory packages water softening solar salt in bags as well. It also produces a variety of other solar salt products, such as swimming pool salt, road salt for melting ice in the winter, and of course, culinary salt. The factory's automated packaging equipment fills both paper and plastic bags. This company also sells solar salt to several industries for use as an ingredient in products such as detergent. There's also the agricultural market. Farmers buy blocks of solar salt, plain or enriched with minerals, as a nutrient for their cattle. The factory produces different salt and mineral formulations, each dyed a different color for easy identification. To produce salt for cattle, the machinery drops 23 kilograms at a time into a block-shaped mold. A press applies 750 tons of pressure, bonding the crystals into a block. The farmer simply sets out blocks among the cattle, and the animals lick away to get their dose of sodium. A label identifies the type of salt block. This one contains iodine to prevent a thyroid disorder called goiter. A tasty and therapeutic bovine snack, courtesy of a saltwater lake and sunshine.